Hello. Welcome
Hi.
back to the Pixify Studio Spotlight. This is number two. So might still be ironing out the kinks, but I'm sitting here with Kat Bloch, the founder
Hello.
and CEO of Modern Activations, MDRN, and super thrilled to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This should be exciting. And so we're going to kind of stick to the usual agenda. This is all about your story. I know studio is not directly applicable, so we'll just say business, your business story, and kind of what you're doing, what you're up to today, how you define it, the category you're in, the services that you're up to, how you got started, that kind of inspired entrepreneurial moment where you took the plunge, so to speak, not to be the most cliche person ever. And then some of the breakout moments that you've experienced. I know there are a handful, so that might be a tricky one to nail down. And then a bit about Pixify and where you're seeing value and how it's supporting your efforts, and then some advice for your peers. So it should be
Yeah,
straightforward. That sound all right?
so excited. Absolutely.
All right. So tell us about Modern Activations, and obviously two brands, two kind of businesses under the business powerhouse that is Cat. So you can kind of just run with it however you see fit.
Awesome. Okay. Well, yeah, I do own two photo booth. Well, what most people consider to be a traditional photo booth company, Modern Photo Booth, which only does weddings. That's it. And then I have Modern Activations that does everything from a photo booth to roaming photography to really large experiential marketing things as well. Funny enough, though, I own quite a few more businesses that I have at some point run off Pixify as well. And one of them is a photography studio, as well as a catering company that I had with my husband. Well, it was his company, but we ran it off there. So we've had a lot of businesses, but now my main focus is that. And then I also do courses for photo booth owners to teach them how to do all this stuff as well.
That man, you got to be working on more stuff. We got
I know,
we
not
got to put more
enough.
we got to put more stuff on your plate. But then that's usually a function of really dialed systems. So that's extraordinary range. My goodness, that's awesome. And so I guess in terms of which business would you like to focus on the most when it comes to, well, I guess generally speaking, kind of like your sweet spot is photo booth
Yeah.
operating, correct? And then you have kind of some different niches or some different end markets that you pointed at.
Yep.
In terms of like, I guess we'll get into kind of systems and how you think about, business frameworks and stuff like that. But can you tell us a little bit about your team?
Yeah. So I operate in Canada. I am Canadian, and we operate across Canada. So I actually have three offices. I have one in Ottawa, Ontario, Toronto, Ontario as well. And then we have one out west in Calgary. So I have a team of 7, 8 full-time people. And then we have a team of like 20 plus contractors, be it photographers, brand ambassadors, all that kind of stuff. And so everyone on my team pretty much uses Pixify. We have systems in place, obviously, like this is my 10th year in business. So we're 10 years old this year.
Cool. That's a milestone, right on.
Yeah, I know. It's really cool to actually be like, wow, it's been 10 years. It feels like yesterday that I just started. But
Totally.
yeah, so we have a pretty big team across Canada. We also do operate in the US. So we've done events in the US as well. And frankly, I will go anywhere I can to do a photo booth.
No doubt. And I mean, it's interesting too. So I guess transitioning a little bit to how, because I think photo booths now are like an absolute staple, right?
Yes.
And experiential marketing, it's funny. I spent a large portion of my adult life in New York City, and I had a friend who ran he kind of coined was an experiential marketing agency. And he did 100-course meal, pop-up meal on the L train on the subway. And logistically, it was absolutely incredible. The subway would stop, they'd shuffle in, and they were doing like duck confit and like all these crazy dishes. And he was like, what is that? He's like, it's marketing. It's just via an experience. And everyone was like, huh? And so I'd love to understand, because I mean, you've 10 years ago, which I mean, that was 2014.
Yeah.
You didn't have a photo booth at every wedding. You for sure didn't have one in corporate activations. Brands weren't thinking about it as a dynamic way to engage folks. And then obviously kind of like the Instagram era hit, and it was about like creating highly photographable moments. But I'd love to understand when you were like, ooh, there's an opportunity here. There's demand. And I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to go all in, because obviously you're super dynamic and you had a lot of choices available to you. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, well, funny. It wasn't planned. So I've always been into photography since high school. I had spent years second shooting with photographers in the area. And like most photographers, I was like, I'm going to be a wedding photographer. Well, after doing it for a few years, I'm like, this is exhausting. Also, like working 8-hour days, you don't drink a lot of water, you get like a piece of bread with butter at the end of the day, you know.
Or you watch
It,
everybody eat like lobster
I
tail. It's
know.
like, hey, can I just have one of those?
Seriously. And it's like, it was really, really long days. And I mean, I love weddings, but I was starting to feel like it wasn't for me. I also wasn't really understanding like how to make this a viable business with profit. So I ended up going to WPPI. And that was really amazing because, well, first of all, I was so broke that I went with two friends and we split a room at Excalibur. Have you ever been there? It's
In
not a
Vegas,
nice.
right? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So it was like $60 a night and it smelled like Axe body spray. And everyone in there, like, where's Camo? And I was like, what is this place? Just like this giant
It's like, we're
castle.
just sleeping here. Set yourself down. Let's get out of here.
Well, yeah, because it was across the street from MGM. So that's where WPPI was. So we would walk over there. I got free passes. Like I couldn't afford to go to any of those classes, but I'm like, I'm going to walk the trade show floor. There were some photographers that I really knew I wanted to see who were doing like mini talks there. And so that was what we did. We went and just walked around and I stumbled on this photo booth. And it was Photo Booth Supply Co. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but
I have indeed. Yeah, very cool
yeah.
outfit. Yeah, totally.
And they had this photo booth, and I was like, what is this? It's a beautiful machine, and the quality of the photo was unreal. It was like studio quality pictures that you were getting out of this. I'm like, I hated photo booths. Like, I literally thought they were the tackiest things ever in the world. Like, you wouldn't catch me dead wearing any of those props at parties. I was like,
Totally.
I
Or
don't
you
know where
get the
this has been.
printouts and it's like everyone's hammered out of their minds.
Yeah, and the print quality was terrible. It's like a webcam, and it's like dark. You can't even see what's going on. But this, I was like, wow, this is a studio. And I remember I called my husband and I was like, I think I need to buy this photo booth. He's like, well, how? Like it was 9,000 US dollars, which as a Canadian, that was like 13 or
At least a
14,000.
cool 13.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wait, not CAD? Oh boy.
I know, yeah. And so I had my parents' emergency American Express, which was only for emergencies, right? And I'm like, I don't know, something inside of me was like, you got to do this, right?
Yes.
Like
Mom, I don't want a photo booth. I need a photo
yeah,
booth.
it really clicked in me. And so I did it. And I'm like, I have 30 days to explain this to my parents and to figure out how to pay this off. And so I did that. I had 6 weeks before they delivered it because back then they handmade every single one of those photo booths. And so when I got home, I started like just doing a website and doing like all the marketing, branding, all that kind of stuff that I knew I was going to have to do. Because again, it clicked, right? I saw it and I was like, you know what? This is the kind of photo booth that I would have at a party if I was having one because it's studio quality. I was going to make it like super stylized and beautiful backdrops and no props. And actually back then I was making custom props out of like with a Cricut machine and glitter paper. And so they were like all customized. My basement floor was just like carpet and glitter.
Yeah. God,
But
your husband's scratching his head like, oh, honey, I don't
yeah.
know about the photo booth business. There's glitter in my hair.
Oh, everywhere. Our house turned into a photo booth business. Our whole basement was just taken over. And yeah, I don't know. It literally just so clicked with me. And I also was able to price that one for like 3 hours. I was charging $975, which 10 years ago, you couldn't get that, at least back then, like with my mind of thinking, you couldn't get that as a photographer, right? This was before the like giant boom of how to actually run a photo or a photography business kind of happened. And so I had no problem getting $975 to stand at a photo booth for 3 hours and print photos for people, you know? And then that's kind of just one event evolved into a second event, and corporations started being like, oh, I have this event for my employees, or I have this event for the store opening. Can you do a photo booth? Can I put my logo on it? And I'm like, yeah, I can put your logo more than here and here and here, you know? And that's when
Totally.
the kind of business development side of me, because I had been in the insurance industry for, I guess, 10 years at this point, and I was doing business development, marketing, like all that kind of stuff has always been very much a part of my life. And so I just started seeing that as the opportunity. And I was like, oh, there's just so much here.
Yeah. Or enough to earn back the startup costs, right? It's like, boom, I nailed one event. I'm in the green.
Yeah.
I'll pay my folks back before they even know what happened. And then you just start to see the green shoots and away you go. So that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
It was crazy.
run events. It was a networking forum in Manhattan called Scaling NYC. It was for like CXOs at rapid growth companies, because for the first time you had like Bonobos and Spotify and all these cool non-giant corporate entities in Manhattan. And we brought a photo booth to one of the events, and it was like it was like people came to use the photo booth, and I was like, all right, like, hey, we have a panel with like the CFO of Warby Parker. Do you guys want to listen? You know, gals, what are we thinking here? And they're like, yeah, after the picture. And I was like, this is interesting. And back to that experiential component, right? That you can kind of wrap in a permanent thing, which is an image, which is just so cool.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Okay, so cool. And it's interesting too how you can start to say, okay, like there are just so many use cases available to me, right? Like you can, like weddings is an obvious one. There's kind of like a consumer application, there's a business application. The whole thing is brandable, right? And then the actual output is brandable. So from a business perspective, it just makes a ton of sense. You're basically just like at the employee party, it's like, cool, every single one of our employees is going to post a social media photo from this photo booth that has our logo tucked into the corner. This is the best spend we've ever made. Cool. So breakout moments. And I know you'd mentioned there, and I will say too, it's so funny in the software world. It's like dashboards sell SaaS.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, what's the most important widget? Revenue. Because when you log in and it's like, oh my God, we just hit this revenue threshold. So feel free to speak about that, or just any kind of breakout moments when you look back where like maybe you were struggling and you punched through, or you achieved a milestone. I think that would be very inspiring for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many. Keep me after 10 years, you've gone through a couple of things, especially like a pandemic as an event industry. I'm sure that's something that a lot of people have dealt with. But there's a few. I mean, my first year of business, we hit 6 figures like really easily, which was also why I was like, hey, this could be a real business. And then I actually implemented Pixify when I started realizing I can't handle doing a day job and doing another full-time job at this point. And so I needed to replace myself during the day with some automations. And so that's what we did with Pixify. And then that really let us grow even more because I didn't have to be doing it all the time. But then my next...
Or can I pause you real quick? Yeah. Can I just ask what we're like, because I think a lot of the times we hear, and there's like a break point where you kind of switch from manual, where it's like, I've got my clients in a spreadsheet. I've got check boxes that are basically the equivalent of like a workflow. So it's like, did I send an invoice? Check. Did I get paid? Check. And then there's kind of a repository of templates that they might use, or they're kind of just copying and pasting and cranking stuff out. What was like that first break point where you were like, dear God, if I get another lead email, I'm not following up with these people. Like, this is not working. Like, what was kind of the thing where you were like, I need to change?
Yeah, for me it was I really like responding to people quickly. Like I know from my perspective, when I reach out to a company, I want them to be equally as excited that they have a customer coming in the door. Totally. Right. And so I really wanted to give that to all of our customers. So when they reach out to us, I wanted them to instantly get an email. And I wasn't able to do that. I would see those things show up on my cell phone and I would be like, oh God, my lunch isn't for another
10 o'clock at night. Yeah. Right, yeah.
Or that too.
Like, honey, I need to get out of bed and pull out my laptop. And it's like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was more during the day because all those people work during the day, right? At night, it was fine. But yeah, when I was also on the road a lot, so driving, you can't really do anything. So the first things that I set up was autoresponders and letting people know what the expectations were, and then follow-ups. So every time we would send out a quote, the follow-ups were automatic so that I didn't have to be, logging in every day and being like, I got to follow up with this person and this person and this person.
Which is usually a very uncomfortable salesy thing for creatives, right? Where it's like, hey, can you pay me? I do need to get paid. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's super useful insight. I know you had a couple others.
Yeah, well, I actually made up a person named Nancy in accounting, and she's the one that sent the follow-ups.
Nice.
So that way I didn't have to feel so bad following up because there was somebody else. Also made us look like a bigger company. And that was the thing. When I started my company, I made it look like we were bigger than we were, right? It was kind of one of those like, not really fake it till you make it, but like that's what I wanted to become. And so I just did that. We had a toll-free number. We had, a website with an address, all that stuff. So I felt like I needed systems in place for that. And those systems helped us get to our next big one, which was the first month we did $200,000 in revenue was unbelievable. And so I have a screenshot of that in my Slack channel somewhere.
Cool.
Because I was like, this, 200,000 is almost what we would make in 2 years at some point. And then we did that in 1 month. That was really cool.
And you gotta love like those, like not like linear trajectories where there's like step function growth, where it's like, whoa, we just added a 0 to our world.
Yeah. Well, then we did another one.
Right. And then they keep coming and you're just like, whoa, something's happening here. This is remarkable.
Yeah, then we hit our first million, and that was crazy. And I remember seeing that on the dashboard as soon as I logged in, because I saw an invoice get paid, and I'm like, I know we were close. And then I logged in, and it said 1 million, and I took that screenshot and I sent it to like everyone who, like all my business contacts that we had been like talking about, like how to scale and all this stuff. And
it's like I went into the car and just held down the horn. Yes.
No. Yeah, no, it's really cool. So I love seeing all of those widgets and like goals. And like for me now, I'm so dialed into metrics and all this other stuff, that before you don't really pay attention to as much, I guess. But it's nice that now, because before it was a lot harder. Like people didn't really care about that kind of stuff. And if you did, you had to be like a Fortune 500 company running Salesforce or, HubSpot or something to have dashboards that showed you your leads and your revenue and all that kind of stuff, or spreadsheets with fancy formulas. But
or some human that has to update them every Friday before the team meeting, And it's interesting too, because like every incremental unit of growth typically is harder.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we punched through, we're on this new plateau. And it's like, well, actually, if we can improve our lead conversion rate by 5%, this is what it looks like. If we can raise our average contract value or our average revenue per customer, however you want to think about it, by $10, we add another 0. So you start to find that like you have to dial these very specific things to improve business outcomes, and you can only improve what you measure, right? So it's an interesting trajectory as things mature.
Yeah. And I love all those, like I'm all about, tagging things and understanding like what each lead is, or conversion rate, and like days to close. And, we did a huge analysis. We pulled literally every lead out of Pixify and like exported them with all their different classifications, and then figured out our ideal customer was literally standing right in front of us. We weren't really sure how to go about this with weddings, because they were taking up the majority of our time. I remember 1 month I got 190 leads in 1 month, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like,
yeah, that's a lot.
But once we pulled all the data and we were able to see like which ones actually book, we automated all the other ones. And literally we don't talk to people unless they initiate a conversation with us now, which means our close ratios are significantly better on the ones that we want to spend time on. And the rest of them just kind of go through the workflows, and we still book them. Surprisingly, after not talking to them, people still, we've really like gotten that workflow down. So that's super exciting. I love that one for sure.
And that's a cool kind of business principle too, like power law or Pareto law, where 20% of the storms, it's even manifests in nature. 20% of the storms create 80% of the damage.
Yep.
And so that's always a very useful thing, where the first thing is like, oh, if you want to grow, like reverse engineer your best customer. Like, how did they find you? And then how do you kind of synthetically create that funnel? But the other thing is like, hey, it turns out these 20%, like this profile represents 20% of your customers or your clients, and it generates 80% of the business outcomes that you're after. But to get to that point, right, it's a function of kind of having your data maintained, where it's like, well, that means we have to at least categorize our leads by service type, by geography, by segment. And then again, I fear I say this too often, but once you've eaten your vegetables, you get to the really cool desserts, and it's like, oh my goodness. And then those business insights are what get me so excited, where it's like, oh my goodness, this is the thing. This is kind of the cheat code that's going to unlock that next level. Cool. I gotta be careful. I'll start getting so excited I get sweaty, because I'm all about the same topics. That's all very, very fun. Cool. Well, those are some fun breakout moments. My gosh. Well, cool. And you've mentioned Pixify a lot, but I guess, is there anything else? I mean, I think so far what I've heard is just kind of as a function of well-kept kind of data, you get visibility, and then that gives you a lot of leverage as an operator, where you're like, hey, this thing is off, and if we fix this, it'll improve. Or if we make this thing work a little better. And then obviously there's kind of this preservation too of your special, or your precious, I should say, kind of brain power, where it's like, I don't need to, I'm not kind of bogged down with these things that have to happen, like the blocking and tackling, the invoice reminders and the other stuff. So you can be more creative about the actual business and the substance, and then being creative about how you grow the business, or
Yeah.
perhaps it's just like kind of a more fulfilling environment. But is there anything else you'd want to touch on about on the Pixify front?
I mean, I could talk about Pixify all day long. And just like, it's such an integral part of my business, right? Like, we've grown so much from like that basement business, and Pixify's grown with us the entire time. And really, it is pretty much the backbone of everything that we do. Cause, you're talking about like now I'm so dialed into like metrics and stuff like that. But there was a time where all I did was, doing the technical side of things of the photo booths. Because a lot of people think of photo booths as like, oh, it's a photo booth. It takes a picture, it prints this 4x6 or a 2x6 or whatever, and you do it at a wedding. But like photo booths are so much more than that. Like we have probably 30 different kinds of what we call them now activations, right? Because it can be everything from an enclosed photo booth to like the open air photo booths. We have roaming photographers, we do green screen, we do video. Like there's just so much. So, before I was really into figuring out how to do all that stuff. And now I have a team of really, really amazing people that do that. I get to be a creative director instead, and I get my hands dirty when I want to. And then the rest of the time, it's like I'm just kind of trying to make sure that everything's running, and I get to spend my time just ideating on some of our contracts instead of having to do everything from start to finish. But yeah, I love this business. And I think a lot of people would never be like, hey, when I grew up, I want to be in photo booths,
Totally. And yeah, that's so cool. Yeah. Then there's something that I was chatting with, but like one of like an adage is, or a principle, honestly, for us that's documented, that is we look at, and when anybody joins the team, they look at it, is you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing better. Like you can't scale if you don't have systems working for you, right? If you have to if you're the one cranking the crank all day long, it's a recipe for burnout. And especially, Pixify caters to a creative audience.
Yeah.
So it's not like highly analytic. Like there's not a lot of accountant profiles. They're squarely creative. So it's not only is it like, are they cranking a crank? They're cranking a crank that makes them miserable and kind of diminishes the energy that they can bring to the part of the work that is what got them into it. So that's always exciting, is to streamline that stuff that it's like, hey, streamline the stuff that needs to happen, but also the stuff that you despise. It's like, oh my God, like this is incredible. Cool. My goodness. Wow. I'm going to have to get into the photo booth business, I think, after this.
You should. It's very lucrative.
Yeah.
Can be, at least.
It's very cool. Well, my goodness, we've covered so much ground. In terms of advice for your peers, and I know this is probably maybe a little too general, but I mean, if you could boil it, like, or another way to say it, this is a Tim Ferriss-ism. Like if you had to put something on a billboard for folks that are thinking about getting into photo booths, for folks that are in it and may not be having as much success, what's on the billboard?
Oh man, we are our own worst enemies. I can genuinely say that we can only go as far as we think we can. And a lot of times, especially in the photo booth industry, I find that a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a side hustle. And I think photography is like that too. People are just like, it's something I do for fun. But these can be very fulfilling businesses if that's what you want, right? So if your goal in your head is to build $1 million photo booth or photography business, then do it. You can do it. And the only person telling you can't do it is yourself. So, yep, we are our own worst enemies.
No doubt. Or I think probably the real scary thing is when you set ambitious goals, get ready to knock them down. So be ready to replenish them with bigger goals, right? It's like, hey, don't be insecure when you get there. Just keep leveling up, head up, eye on the horizon, and just see what happens.
And people don't realize that I think the biggest thing for me was like, I had a 10-year goal, which I actually hit. And then I got there and I was like, shoot, now what? What's the next goal? And you don't realize that you're going for this thing for so long, and then you get it and you're like lost. So you always have to be setting goals, always going, that to that next thing. It doesn't always have to be financial either, right? A lot of people think it's always a financial goal, but it could be freedom of time, or maybe you don't want to live in cold Canada like me anymore.
Or it's like, I want to hit the same goal and spend half as much time on the business, right? Like there's different ways to think about it. For sure. Well, right on, Kat. This has been totally. I'm like, this is I've been having so much fun. I'm like a little kid after a few of these calls. This has been totally amazing. So I thank you again for obviously your time's very valuable. So thank you for generously kind of hanging with us and sharing your story. And there will be we'll include kind of show notes, of course, with ways to get in touch with you. I think obviously, you do so much for the category that you participate in for folks that are up and coming, folks that want to learn more. So I would say if you are thinking about this, or if you're on this journey, Kat is an extraordinary person to hit up and follow and just be around.
Thank you.
So thank you again. I think with that, we can go ahead and wrap right on.
Amazing. Thank you so much.